The wind howled through the narrow streets of the small village, carrying with it the smell of smoke and wet earth. 9-year-old Ilara clutched her thin cloak tighter around her small frame, trying to ignore the emptiness that had settled in her chest. Her uncle, the only family she had ever known, was a cruel man. But until now, she had not understood just how deep his greed ran. Ilara's life had always been one of quiet neglect. She lived in a small, crumbling house at the edge of the village, where shadows clung to the corners and the floors creaked under every step. Her uncle often bragged about having her as a useful asset, but to Ilara, it felt more like a prison. She had no friends her own age, no toys to call her own, and her laughter had long since faded into memory. One chilly evening, as the sun dipped behind the jagged hills, her uncle called her into the dimly lit kitchen. The fire in the hearth was weak, casting flickering shadows across his face. "Ilara," he said, his voice flat and cold, "you are no longer needed here. You belong to someone else now." Ilara's heart froze. She did not understand. What do you mean?" she whispered, her small hands trembling. Her uncle's eyes gleamed with a mixture of greed and indifference. "A merchant is willing to pay 30 coins for you. 30 coins. That is more than you are worth to me here. You will leave tonight." Ilara's mouth opened, but no words came. She wanted to scream, to beg, to tell him that she was not an object to be bought and sold. But she knew resistance would be useless. Her uncle's face was hard, unyielding, and she realized, with a cold, sinking feeling, that he truly did not care for her at all. That night, under a sky streaked with lightning and thunder, Ilara was led away by the merchant. The streets were empty, silent, except for the distant hoot of an owl. The merchant's cart creaked and groaned as it rolled over uneven cobblestones. Ilara sat stiffly on the hard wooden bench, the wind biting her cheeks, her thoughts spinning in a whirl of fear and disbelief. As they traveled further from the village, a strange figure appeared above them. A silver-winged raven. Its feathers glimmered in the dim light, and its sharp eyes followed the cart relentlessly. Ilara stared at it, mesmerized, sensing a strange connection she could not explain. It felt as though the bird understood her pain, as if it had come to watch over her. The merchant said nothing, and Ilara did not dare ask. She watched the dark forests blur past, each tree a looming shadow. The world she had known was disappearing, replaced by an unknown realm where she had no place, no name, no claim to safety. Finally, they arrived at a manor hidden deep within the hills, a place shrouded in mist and mystery. Its high stone walls were covered with creeping vines, and the windows glowed with a faint golden light. There was an air of power about the place, as if it belonged to someone far beyond ordinary mortals. The merchant handed Ilara over to a woman dressed in robes that shimmered like liquid midnight. Her eyes were sharp, almost predatory, but there was also a strange sadness in them. "This is her," the merchant said, counting the coins. 30? Just as agreed. The woman nodded without a word and gestured for Ilara to follow her inside. The manor's interior was like stepping into another world. The walls were lined with books that seemed impossibly old, their spines worn with age. Candles flickered in sconces, casting dancing shadows that whispered secrets Ilara could not yet understand. Ilara's heart pounded. Fear mixed with awe as she followed the woman through winding corridors and up grand staircases. The air smelled of old parchment, herbs, and something else she could not name. A faint trace of magic, perhaps, or the echo of a power long forgotten. "You will stay here," the woman said finally, stopping before a room at the end of a long hallway. "You will learn, or you will perish. That choice is yours." Ilara nodded silently. She did not understand what the woman meant, but she knew it was true. Survival had become the only rule of her life. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The manor was full of children like her, some quiet and withdrawn, others fierce and cunning. They were taught to read, to fight, and to harness the strange, subtle magic that flowed through the land. Ilara's own gift was slow to awaken, but she discovered that she could sense things others could not. Hidden passages, whispered thoughts, faint threads of energy that lingered in the air. She spent hours alone in the manor's hidden gardens, a place overgrown with ivy and flowers that glowed faintly under the moonlight. Here she could forget the cruelty of the world, if only for a moment. She found solace in the gentle rustle of leaves, the hum of bees, and the quiet company of the silver-winged raven, which had followed her from the night of her capture. It would perch nearby, watching, waiting, a silent guardian in a world that had been unkind to her. One evening, as the sky burned with the colors of sunset, Ilara discovered a small, locked chest hidden beneath a pile of dust and cobwebs in the manor's library. Its wood was carved with intricate patterns, and a faint golden crest shimmered in the dying light. Curiosity overcame caution, and with trembling hands, she pried it open. Inside lay a collection of letters, old coins, and a small pendant engraved with the same crest she had seen on the chest. Her heart raced. She recognized the symbol. It was the crest of the kingdom's royal family. Questions surged in her mind. Could it be possible? Could she be more than just a poor, abandoned child? That night, Ilara lay awake, the pendant clutched in her small hands. Shadows danced across the walls, whispering secrets she could almost understand. Her mind was a storm of wonder and fear. If she was truly the lost heiress, why had her uncle sold her? And if her bloodline held such power, what would that mean for the world she had been thrust into? Days later, during a lesson in the manor's Hall of Mirrors, Ilara's magic stirred unexpectedly. As she traced her fingers along the etched designs of the mirrors, a faint glow emanated from her hands. The other children gasped, and the sorceress's eyes widened, not with anger, but with something else, recognition, awe, and perhaps fear. "Ilara," the woman said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "you have a gift, one that could change the fate of kingdoms. But power is a dangerous companion, and only those with courage and wisdom can wield it without destruction." Ilara nodded, determination kindling in her chest. She did not yet understand the full extent of her abilities, but she knew she would not be a victim again. She would learn, she would survive, and one day she would reclaim what was taken from her. One stormy night, as lightning split the sky and rain hammered the windows of the manor, the silver-winged raven returned. Ilara followed it through winding hallways and hidden staircases until she arrived at a door she had never seen before. The wood was black as midnight, etched with runes that seemed to glow faintly in the flickering candlelight. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. Inside was a chamber filled with treasures and artifacts, each more magnificent than the last. Scrolls and tomes lined the walls, chronicling the history of the kingdom and its lost royal line. And there, in the center of the room, lay a document that made Ilara's heart stop. It bore her name. She was listed as the rightful heir, the lost princess who had vanished after her parents' untimely deaths. Tears blurred her vision. She had been nothing but a pawn, sold for 30 coins, betrayed by the one person she had trusted most. And yet, here was proof that her life had meaning, that she was destined for more than the darkness she had endured. As she traced the words with her finger, a new resolve burned within her. She would not let her uncle's greed define her. She would not let fear chain her. She would rise, claim her place, and confront the darkness that had tried to steal her life. and somewhere in the shadows, the silver-winged raven watched, as if to say, "The world will remember your name, Elara, but first you must remember yourself." The storm outside raged on, echoing the turmoil within her. For the first time in her young life, Elara felt the stirrings of hope, courage, and a power that was entirely her own. And as lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the ancient chamber, she whispered to herself, "I am not lost. I am not forgotten. I am the heiress, and I will return." The journey had only just begun. The manor had grown quieter since that stormy night, yet the shadows seemed to thicken in corners where no light reached. Elara's discovery of the royal documents had changed everything within her. She no longer felt like a mere child cast aside by her uncle's greed. She was an heiress, a daughter of a kingdom whose fate had been stolen from her before she even knew she existed. But knowing was only the beginning. Power without guidance could be dangerous, and Elara still did not understand the full extent of what she had inherited. The silver-winged raven had returned again, perching silently on a high beam of the library, as if to remind her that destiny had eyes, and those eyes were watching. The sorceress, sensing the change in Elara, began to train her more intensely. Days blurred into nights as lessons in magic, history, and strategy filled the hours. Elara's hands were often blistered from practice, her mind weary from absorbing knowledge she had never imagined existed. But every spell she learned, every rune she traced, made her feel a spark of something greater, a fire of awakening that stirred deep in her chest. "Magic is not simply a force," the sorceress said one evening, her voice soft yet commanding. "It is a reflection of who you are. If your heart is clouded by anger, it will consume you. But if your heart is guided by purpose, it will illuminate the path before you." Elara nodded, though she felt uncertainty gnaw at her. How could she trust her heart when the world had been so cruel? When her own blood had sold her for 30 coins? The answer came slowly, in small moments that taught her resilience. She discovered hidden corridors within the manor, secret gardens bathed in moonlight, and ancient libraries where the books seemed to whisper secrets of the past. Each discovery reminded her that even in darkness, there were places of beauty and strength. It was during one of these explorations that she first encountered Kalen, a young warrior who had been training under the sorceress for years. His movements were precise, almost flawless, and yet his eyes carried a shadow of something unspoken, a weight of responsibility too heavy for one so young. "You shouldn't be wandering here alone," Kalen said, his voice steady but tinged with concern as he stepped from the shadows. Elara straightened, clutching a small dagger she had taken for protection. "And you shouldn't be lurking in my paths," she replied, her voice firm despite the nervous flutter in her chest. Kalen gave a faint smile, almost imperceptible. "I am here to watch, not to fight, though I will fight if you are in danger." Over the next weeks, their paths crossed repeatedly. Kalen was disciplined, often distant, yet there was a quiet bond forming between them. He recognized the spark of power in Elara, the same spark he had seen in the great heroes chronicled in the ancient tomes. And Elara, though wary, found herself drawn to his presence, a sense of safety in a world that had given her so little. But not all lessons were gentle. One day, during training in the Hall of Mirrors, Elara's magic surged unexpectedly. She had been attempting a simple spell meant to illuminate a dark corner when the mirrors themselves seemed to ripple and shift. Shadows elongated, forming shapes that whispered her parents' names. "Elara," Kalen's voice called through the chaos, steady and grounding. "Focus. Do not let them control you." She clenched her fists, forcing her mind to calm. Slowly, the shadows withdrew. leaving only the faint glow of her own magic. The sorceress watched in silence, a mixture of awe and concern on her face. "You have the blood of kings," she finally said, "but with it comes a burden. The world will not wait for you to be ready. You must decide if you will wield this power, or let it be taken from you." Ilara's thoughts returned to her uncle, to the man who had sold her without a second thought. She wanted revenge, yet the sorceress's words reminded her that anger alone could be dangerous. She had to be smart, patient, and strong. The first real test of her abilities came sooner than she expected. One evening, Kalen approached her with grave news. "Something is stirring in the kingdom," he said. "A noble lord has learned of your survival. He seeks to claim you or destroy you before you can reclaim your heritage." Ilara's stomach twisted. "Destroy me? Why? I have done nothing to him." Kalen's eyes were hard, reflecting the weight of experience far beyond his years. "Because bloodlines are power. He fears you and what you might become." The night was heavy with tension as they prepared for what lay ahead. The sorceress offered them both a charm, infused with protective magic, and whispered a warning. "The path you choose tonight may change everything. Trust each other and trust yourselves." The two of them moved through the forest under the cover of darkness. The trees stretched high, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The wind carried the faint scent of rain and the whisper of ancient curses. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. But with Kalen by her side, she felt a courage she had never known before. They arrived at a ruined watchtower, hidden deep in the woods, where the noble lord's men were waiting. Shadows flitted among the crumbling stones, and the air seemed charged with anticipation. Kalen motioned for Ilara to stay close. "We must be careful. They are skilled and dangerous." Ilara nodded, her small hands clenched at her sides. She focused, drawing on the magic that had been awakening within her. The air around her seemed to hum, responding to her will. The first attack came suddenly. A figure lunged from the darkness, but Ilara reacted instinctively. A surge of light erupted from her hands, throwing the attacker back with a force that stunned even Kalen. They moved together like a single unit. Kalen's sword cutting through shadows, while Ilara's magic illuminated and protected their path. It was a dance of trust and instinct, and with every moment Ilara felt herself growing stronger, not just in skill, but in confidence. Yet as the battle reached its peak, Ilara froze. Among the attackers, she recognized a familiar, hateful face, her uncle. He had come, armed with dark magic of his own, seeking to capture or destroy the girl he had once sold. "Ilara," Kalen said urgently, his voice breaking through her shock. "Do not let him control you. Remember who you are." Her uncle sneered, eyes glinting with greed and malice. "You were mine once, girl. And now you will return or die trying to claim a throne that is not yours." Ilara's hands trembled, but she remembered the sorceress's teachings. Magic was a reflection of the heart. She focused on her anger, not to consume her, but to fuel her courage. A burst of light exploded from her chest, and the shadows around her uncle recoiled. He stumbled back, momentarily overwhelmed by her power. Kalen seized the moment, striking with precision that sent her uncle retreating into the night. Breathing heavily, Ilara fell to her knees, exhausted, but alive. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with a sense of clarity. She was no longer a victim. She was a force to be reckoned with. As dawn approached, the forest was quiet once more. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the path back to the manor. Ilara and Kalen walked side by side, silent but united. "Your power is extraordinary," Kalen said softly, "but it is not just strength that will win your kingdom. You must learn patience, strategy, and trust. And even then, the path will be dangerous. Ilara nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on her young shoulders. She knew he was right. The journey ahead would be filled with trials, betrayals, and choices that could shape not only her destiny, but the fate of the kingdom itself. That night, as she lay in her small room, the silver-winged raven appeared once more. It circled above her, wings glinting in the candlelight, and then perched silently by her window. Its dark eyes seemed to speak without words. The world will test you. The shadows will rise, but you are not alone. Ilara held the pendant she had found, the crest of her family glowing faintly against her chest. She whispered to herself, a promise to the winds, to the forest, and to the unseen forces watching over her. I will reclaim what is mine. I will face the darkness. I will not be afraid. The fire of awakening had ignited within her, burning brighter than any fear or shadow. And as the storm clouds of the past faded with the rising sun, Ilara realized that her journey had truly begun, and that the world would soon know the name of the lost heiress. Yet somewhere in the distance, beyond the walls of the manor and the forest they had crossed, the shadows of the kingdom stirred. Old enemies whispered, dark magic shifted, and fate itself began to move toward a confrontation that would change everything. Ilara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of destiny and the spark of hope mingling together. She was no longer just a child sold for 30 coins. She was an heir, a warrior, and a beacon of something the kingdom had long forgotten. And in the silence, as the first light of morning touched the land, the silver-winged raven spread its wings and took flight, a silent guardian watching over the heiress who was destined to change the world. The kingdom slept uneasily beneath a sky heavy with clouds, as if the heavens themselves sensed the storm that was coming. In the distance, the manor's towers rose like silent sentinels over the misted forest, and within its walls, Ilara, prepared for the confrontation she had long known was inevitable. She stood before the sorceress, her hands tracing the intricate patterns on the pendant that had belonged to her family. It had been her guide, her talisman, and her reminder that she was more than a sold child. She was the lost heiress, the rightful ruler of a kingdom swallowed by greed and shadow. "You are ready," the sorceress said softly, her eyes reflecting both pride and concern. "Tonight, you will face your past, your uncle, and the forces that seek to keep you from your destiny. But remember, true power lies not in anger or revenge, but in knowing when to act with wisdom." Ilara nodded, a calm resolve settling over her. The fire of her awakening had been kindled in the forest, honed in the halls of mirrors, and tested in battle. Now, it burned brighter than fear or doubt. She would reclaim what had been stolen from her, and she would do it not as a victim, but as a force of justice and light. Kalen approached quietly, his armor glinting faintly in the candlelight. His dark eyes met hers, and for a moment no words were spoken. There was only understanding, trust, and the quiet bond forged in the fires of their shared trials. "You are ready," he said finally, his voice steady, "and I will be with you every step of the way." Together they left the safety of the manor, moving through the forest under the cloak of darkness. The trees seemed to part for them, or perhaps it was Ilara's growing power that commanded even nature to bend in her favor. The silver-winged raven followed above, a sentinel of light in a world steeped in shadow. They reached the ruins of the old castle, where her uncle had established his base of dark power. The walls were jagged and broken, a reflection of the corruption and greed that had taken root there. Shadows clung to the stone, and the air vibrated with malevolent energy. Ilara stepped forward, her hands glowing faintly with magic. She could feel the pulse of her bloodline within her, a rhythm that connected her to the lost legacy of her parents. Kalen moved beside her, sword ready, his presence steadying the storm of emotions within her. Her uncle emerged from the shadows, his eyes wide with recognition and hatred. "So," he sneered, "the little girl I sold thinks she can return and claim what was never hers. You are weak, foolish, and small." Alara's chest rose and fell with quiet determination. "I am not weak," she said. "I am the heiress of this kingdom, and your time of deception is over." He laughed, a hollow, cruel sound that echoed through the ruins. Dark magic swirled around him, tendrils of shadow curling like snakes, ready to strike. But Alara did not falter. She had trained for this moment, and she understood now that her magic was not merely a weapon. It was a reflection of her heart, her courage, and her purpose. The battle began with a clash of forces. Shadows met light, steel met energy, and the ruins shook with the intensity of their confrontation. Kalen moved like a shadow himself, deflecting attacks and protecting Alara from the brunt of her uncle's assault. Alara's magic surged. She called upon the strength of her bloodline, the lessons of the sorceress, and the courage of a girl who had been sold but had refused to be broken. Light erupted from her hands, forming a barrier that repelled the shadowy tendrils and forced her uncle to stagger back. "You cannot defeat me!" he roared, his eyes blazing with fury. "I am the master here, and you are nothing!" But Alara did not answer with words. She moved forward, her magic a force of clarity and power. Each step was deliberate, each motion guided by both strategy and instinct. She remembered the pain of betrayal, the nights of fear, and the quiet moments of hope that had carried her through. And with every memory, her resolve grew stronger. Kalen struck with precision, disarming one of her uncle's dark constructs, while Alara focused on the core of his power. The shadows around him faltered, responding to her command. She had learned to wield her magic not out of hatred, but from a place of purpose. "Your greed, your lies, your cruelty, they end tonight," she said, her voice steady and filled with authority. Her uncle's face twisted with disbelief as Alara's light enveloped him. For the first time, he saw the truth reflected in her eyes. The child he had sold for 30 coins was no longer helpless. She was formidable, just, and unyielding. The shadows collapsed, and the castle ruins were bathed in a soft, golden light as the last remnants of her uncle's dark magic were swept away. He fell to his knees, exhausted and powerless. Alara approached, but she did not strike. She did not need to. Justice was not about vengeance. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully hers. "You will answer for your deeds," she said, her voice calm but unwavering. "Not with death, but with truth. Your actions will be revealed to the kingdom, and the people will know what you have done." Her uncle's defiance faltered, replaced by a grudging respect, or perhaps fear. He realized that Alara's strength was not just in magic, but in her heart and mind. She had transformed from the child he had sold into a leader capable of shaping the destiny of a kingdom. As dawn broke over the horizon, Alara and Kalen stood together atop the highest tower of the ruins. The wind carried the scent of rain and new beginnings. The silver-winged raven circled above, a silent witness to the triumph of the heiress. Kalen's gaze met hers, and for a moment, there was no need for words. The bond they had formed in the trials of the forest, the manor, and the ruins had grown into something deeper, a connection forged through trust, courage, and shared purpose. "You did it," he said softly. "You faced the darkness and did not falter. You are truly the heir of this kingdom." Alara smiled faintly, the weight of the past lifting slightly from her shoulders. "I could not have done it alone," she replied. "You were with me every step of the way." The kingdom beyond the ruins was quiet, but the echoes of her victory would resonate far and wide. News of her return and her triumph over the darkness would spread, reminding the people that the lost princess had come home. Yet even in victory, Ilara knew the journey was not over. The kingdom was wounded, and her role as heiress meant she would have to rebuild, protect, and guide her people. But she felt ready. She had faced betrayal, mastered her power, and discovered the strength within herself that could not be broken. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of crimson and gold, Ilara and Kaelin returned to the manor. The sorceress awaited them, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and wonder. "You have done what few could," she said. "But remember, Ilara, true leadership is not only about power, it is about compassion, wisdom, and the courage to act when others cannot." Ilara nodded, understanding the depth of her responsibility. She was no longer a souled child. She was an heiress, a protector, and a leader who had risen from shadows to claim her destiny. Kaelin placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "The world is different now," he said, "but whatever comes next, we face it together." Ilara looked out over the manor gardens, where the first stars began to shimmer in the twilight. She felt the presence of the silver-winged raven, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. The creature had been her silent companion, her guide through darkness, and now it seemed to nod in approval, as if to say that her journey had only just begun. "I am ready," she whispered, her voice carrying both determination and hope. "I will face whatever comes next, and I will protect the kingdom that is mine. And I will not walk this path alone." The wind stirred the leaves of the trees, carrying with it a promise of new beginnings. The ruins behind them were silent, the shadows dispersed, but the magic and legacy of the past remained, reminding Ilara that while darkness could challenge her, it could never define her. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the forests and hills, the first light of a new era began to shine. Ilara's name, once whispered in silence and shadows, would now be spoken in awe and respect. She was the lost heiress returned, the girl sold for 30 coins who had risen to reclaim her throne. The silver-winged raven took flight once more, gliding above the manor and into the awakening sky. Ilara watched it vanish into the horizon, a symbol of the journey she had completed and the adventures that still awaited. She felt a sense of peace, tempered with the knowledge that life as a ruler would hold its own trials. Kaelin stepped beside her, his gaze steady. "You have changed the course of history tonight," he said quietly, "and I am honored to stand with you." Ilara placed a hand on his, a gesture of trust and unspoken understanding. Together, they watched the kingdom awaken beneath the first light of dawn, knowing that the darkness had been faced and overcome, and that the fire of her awakening would burn brightly for all time. For Ilara, the child sold for 30 coins, the journey from betrayal to triumph had been long and arduous, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to claim not only her crown, but her place in the hearts of her people. And as the world began to stir with the promise of a new day, she whispered one last vow. "I am Ilara, heiress of this kingdom, and I will protect it with all that I am. The shadows may return, but I will stand against them. I am ready." And with that, the lost princess finally returned to her rightful place, her destiny fulfilled, yet her story only just beginning.